Hello students, welcome back to this series on the explanation of the question paper of 2022. And as a continuation of this series on GS3, we were seeing the section of agriculture and food processing industry. And as part of those agriculture and food processing industry, we have discussed the 10 markers. And in this particular video, we are going to discuss the 15 markers from the same section. Because in that video, we have discussed that this particular section is 50 marks worth of GS3, that is, which is almost 1/5. And with such a kind of importance, now looking at the questions that were asked with respect to this GS3, especially the 15 markers, it is question number 13 and question number 14. And when you look at this question number 13 and question number 14, here we see that question number 13, what are the main bottlenecks in upstream and downstream process of marketing of agricultural products? Now here we need to understand, my dear, that this is not asking about agriculture. This is about marketing with respect to agricultural products. Marketing with respect to the agricultural products. That is, it is categorically talking about what is an upstream challenge, what is a downstream challenge. Right? In that context, we have to see what is the volume of the produce also. We have to see what is the outcome, what is the extent of profitability that is being driven or that is being derived by the farmers. So that aspect we have to see. We'll discuss in detail solutions. So that is with respect to 13th question. And so in this we have to certainly talk about what can be the measures that are to be taken, because they are talking about bottlenecks, right? That aspect has to be remembered. Then when we talk about the 14th question, they are asking about what is integrated farming system and how is it helpful to small and marginal farmers. Because when you talk about integrated systems, it is talking about the consideration or the interconnectedness of whole of the biosphere. That is the plants, that is the animals, that is the soil, that is the water, that is the light. Every aspect, every resources, a conducive and a symbiotic and a mutualistic interrelation or relationship that is existing between the biotic and abiotic elements is what is generally consideration of integrated systems. So here they are categorically talking about integrated farming systems. And when they are talking about integrated farming systems, and here we are seeing that how is this helpful with respect to, in specific, with respect to the small and marginal farmers. Because when you talk about small and marginal farmers, we know those individuals with less than 2 hectares of land is what is small and marginal farmers, and we also know that around 84% of Indian farmers are small and marginal. Because one major issue that we see in the context of agriculture is the fragmentation of land. Fragmentation of agricultural land. When you have this fragmentation of agricultural land, it fundamentally shows that the systems are broken. The basic availability of land itself is very, very less. So in that consideration, we have to talk about the advantage of the integrated farming system. Now let's see what can be the structure that can be used with respect to such a question. And when you talk about this 13th question, it is talking about that what are the main bottlenecks, that means challenges, in upstream and downstream process of marketing of agricultural products. Marketing of agricultural products. That means, now in any system, if you have to understand what is this upstream and downstream, it fundamentally means, say if this is the agricultural activity. If this is the agricultural activity, whatever is this side of this agricultural activity, say this is agricultural activity, agricultural produce, whatever is this side, this is upstream. And whatever is this side, this is downstream. So when you talk about this upstream, it has got to do with the input side, and when you look at the when you look at the downstream, it has got to do with the output side. That is what is the simplest understanding of upstream and downstream. With such a kind of understanding of upstream and downstream, when you look at the kind of introduction that can be given, that we see that the major issue for agrarian distress, the major reason for the agrarian distress is the marketing issue. Because when you talk about the marketing issue, the major issue that you would find is with respect to it is a post-agricultural activity, it is a post-harvest activity, and the marketing is a major issue for the reason that the supply chain of the marketing is not very, very well established. It is all fragmented and it is all driven with number of challenges. Now, with such a kind of understanding, the second aspect is when you talk about the body, When you look at the bottlenecks, now when you look at the bottlenecks that are present, in the bottlenecks we have to talk about one major aspect is what is upstream. Now when you talk about the upstream, we know that it is with respect to the agricultural productivity is a bottleneck. And not only the agricultural productivity, it is also with respect to the extent of produce on the basis of seeds or the basis of investment or the basis of capital. All these are bottlenecks, and it is not only that, on the basis of the land availability per se. Because when you look at the average land holding of an Indian farmer, it is around 1.08 hectare, and which has reduced from 1.15 hectare. Right? So when you have this declining trend with respect to land, you automatically have an issue with respect to the productivity. And not only that, this is again with respect to the diversity that is present. Diversity of the products that is present. Then apart from that, when you look at the second aspect with respect to the bottlenecks, that is the downstream process. When you talk about the downstream bottlenecks, the major downstream bottlenecks that we have is with respect to the transportation. Not only the transportation, and you also see the impacted shelf life. When you talk about the impacted shelf life, it fundamentally means that there is an issue with respect to the storage systems. There is an issue that is persisting with respect to the storage system, which is creating the shelf life problem. And not only the shelf life, not only the storage system, but we also have an issue that is persisting with respect to this, that is the lack of awareness, or we can say lack of market intelligence. Now when you talk about this, this is also a major issue that is persisting, major bottleneck that is persisting in the context of downstream. Then apart from that, we also see that restricted markets, right? Because when you talk about these restricted markets, and in this restricted markets also, for example APMCs, for example mandis, for example Raitu Bazaars, then this restricted market also has an issue of middlemen, the intermediaries, and you would see because of these intermediaries, the profit levels that are actually derived is not giving a direct benefit to the farmers. So all these are issues that are existing with respect to your upstream as well as downstream. Now when we look at this upstream and downstream, the immediate thing that we have to see is what are the solutions, or what are the measures that can be given with respect to such a kind of enhancing the marketing of the agricultural product. Right? If you want to talk about a categorical differentiation, we can talk about what is the solution with respect to the upstream, what is the solution with respect to the downstream, that can be given. Right? And here we need to remember one major aspect that we cannot afford to forget is the commercial nature of the agricultural produce with the help of the corporates. Because when you talk about the some brands like Urban Fresh or some brands like your Reliance Fresh, so here what is happening is there is a tandem, there is a connect that is existing, and the supply chain is all continuous. So because of this, they are able to reap the profits. And not only this, we also have to talk about the electronic aspect. That is, one classic example that we see is ENAM. And not only that, we also have to talk about the certain agricultural extension services. Because these agri extension services would provide a necessary solution for the upstream bottlenecks. So all these things have to be incorporated when you are discussing the solutions part. We cannot afford to miss such solutions here. Right? Please understand. Now in this, again, if you want to conclude this answer, we can say that agricultural marketing is key to incentivize the agriculture as an activity. Right? It is a key to incentivize the agriculture as an activity. Once you are able to understand this, marketing is a key to incentivize this agriculture as an activity. I think that is what is the purpose of enhancing the marketability of the agricultural products. That is what is the understanding, right? So it's again a simple question if you understand, and you would have a ready-made content on such questions, right? Moving on to the next question and the explanation. That is the 14th question. Now when you talk about this 14th question, it is talking about what is integrated farming system, and how is it helpful to the small and marginal farmers. So it is talking about the integrated farming system vis-a-vis the small and marginal farmers. And when you talk about the small and marginal farmers and the categorical understanding with respect to integrated farming system, the introduction is again straightforward in this particular question. we talk about what is integrated farming system. And when you talk about what is integrated farming system, please understand it includes the integrated pest management. It includes not only the integrated pest management, but it also includes with respect to this integrated watershed management. Integrated watershed management. Not only that, it also talks about the components of the mixed farming. It also talks about the components of mixed farming. That means that in this aspect of integrated farming system, we are taking all the inputs and we are taking all the outputs, and there is a cyclical relation that is existing in this context of integrated farming system. And here we are talking about the integrated management. Integrated management, right? Either it might be with respect to pests, either it might be with respect to fertilizers, either it might be with respect to herbicides or weedicides, or either it might be with respect to irrigation, or either it might be with respect to seeds. So all these input parameters that are looked or that are seen in this context of farming system, it is all integrated systems, right? Once we understand this integrated farming system, we have to see how is it helpful. How is it helpful to small and marginal farmers? How is it helpful to small and marginal farmers? That is what is the second part of this question. And when you look at this, before we understand how is it helpful to the small and marginal farmers, we have to see what are the issues being faced by small and marginal farmers. Right? Because once you understand what are the issues that are being faced by small and marginal farmers, automatically you will see what is the integrated farming system and what is its role. Because in a technique called mapping that you see in the answer writing, you would see that this would help. Once you understand like what are the issues are the small land holdings. Not only the small land holdings, but also with respect to this lower levels of availability of capital, which is leading to lower investments. And not only this, but also the reduced produce. And also this, what happens is when you look at the nature of the practices that they do, that they would try for intensive agricultural system. And when they would try for intensive agricultural system, what happens is they would see excessive usage of materials like fertilizers, excessive usage of materials like pesticides, excessive usage of resources like water. So all these intensive agricultural practices would also affect the soil health, which is persisting. Right? So such a kind of system can be discussed. And once we understand what are the issues that are persisting with respect to the small and marginal farmers, we can see that how is this integrated farming system going to resolve those issues. Now when I talk about the integrated farming system, what happens? We can talk about that integrated farming system would diversify the risk. It would promote the risk diversification. Because when you talk about the promotion of risk diversification, what happens is when you look at the allied sector which is integrated into the farming system or the mixed farming systems, what we would see is the allied sector would act as a buffer to the risks. Not only that, allied sector would act as a buffer to the risk, but we will also see with respect to this, how is it helpful to the small and marginal, we would also see that the land consolidation can happen. And not only the land consolidation, but when you look at the other aspects, we also talk about the sustainable practices. The sustainable practices that are used. The sustainable practices that are promoted, because we have seen that one major issue is they are using intensive agricultural practices which is promoting or which is exploiting the resources. So sustainable practices are also promoted in this context of integrated farming system. Then we would also talk about the rationalized or rational utilization of resources. Rational utilization of resources. And if you have to conclude this, what happens is we can see the simplest conclusion here is the integrated farming systems or the integrated farming management. What happens is it would enable the small and marginal farmers to promote sustainable agriculture. That is what is the understanding. With respect to the sustainable agriculture. Because if you want to bring in one more dynamism, we can talk about this. How are the small and marginal farmers being impacted by the phenomena of climate change? Once you understand this, how are these being impacted by the phenomena of climate change, we can categorically talk about that it promoting the sustainable agricultural phenomena. Right? This is what is the simplest understanding of this question, and this is a repeated question from 2019 again. Please understand, my dear, as there are frequently repeated questions, repeated topics at least, what we are trying to do in Likes Purana is to derive that importance, is to identify those hotspots that are present in Layak's Purana in the previous year questions of different subjects, right? We have done such a kind of analysis for GS1. Now we are going to come up with such a kind of analysis for GS2. Okay, stay tuned for more of such videos, and we would continue this series on explanation for the other papers that are left, right?